Well, hello, Eastlake. It's me, Kristen, and I'm here with Peter Gad.
Hey everybody.
And we're here for for us, the last time for us to record together, just you and me. So this is it.
I'm excited to share. It'll be good.
Yeah.
It'll be good. This is like, this is gonna be part two, right? Because we talked with Michelle, and then we're having this reflection, and then we have a final reflection with Ryan. So
Yeah. I think I want to start out by saying to people who are listening, this might be a little bit different in that I feel like when we come to record, we always are thinking about the people listening, and there's a purpose in serving people out there. And this one, I think it's just for us. This is our
yeah,
journal entry. This is our reflections on Eastlake and what we're taking with us and lessons we've learned. And it's kind of like when I posted my summer montage on Instagram of pictures that wasn't really for anyone else. That's for me. So I could go back and be like, oh, look how cute my kids are. And I forgot we did that. And then I feel like this message is this is just for us to reflect. And I hope maybe some people get some things out of it. But in the end, this one's for me and you.
yeah. I think it's good. I think part of it too is just an exercise. Like I've been on the team since 2011. I think you were around there, 2010,
Yeah.
9. Like we've been on this similar 12-year journey. It's a decade, and there's a lot of things that you've gone through, and that sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's easy just to have the recency bias of like nostalgic years. I think it's good to like, it was helpful for me to kind of just reflect on like overall what are some of the themes. So I'm excited
Yeah.
that we get to discuss it a little bit.
Yeah.
Hopefully some of those themes will resonate with others. I think it'll be a little bit of both.
Yeah. I think so too. Um, and I think we're not quite sure. We both have some lessons we want to share, like major, I think, learnings that we're taking with us. And we may go back and forth. We might just let each other talk. We'll see how it goes.
Provide major pushback to me, please do.
You
I
did not
strongly
learn.
disagree with that.
You did not learn that. I was
Possible.
there. I know you did it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. You want to start? Why don't you start one of your lessons that you're taking with
Yeah.
you?
Okay. I was thinking like, do I start with small and then kind of build up to the big one, or do I start with the big one, like the biggest takeaway? And I'm going to start with the biggest takeaway. I think
Okay.
the biggest thing that I'm taking away from Eastlake was that being on this team and in this ecosystem, the community of Eastlake, the organization, whatever, employed by Eastlake, all these different things that contributed to the last decade or so of my life. The biggest thing that it taught me was it taught me to see my worldview. That's kind of how I'm summarizing it. Like it taught me that I used this metaphor before, but I'm wearing these lenses through which I'm viewing reality.
Yeah.
And that isn't everybody else's reality. That is my reality. And coming to East, like I remember, I mean, I was 27-year-old, right? And I was just on the beginning journey of like asking questions, and I feel like kind of becoming a critical thinker, which is crazy to me because I'd gone to school, I'd gotten a master's degree, but I'm like, I am starting to learn how to think critically at
You got
age
a
28.
master's degree in what you already knew and thought.
Yeah, basically, like it helped reinforce all of my biases. Um, but I was just thinking about like the journey of Eastlake. Um, like I came to Eastlake and I really didn't have any questions about my religion. I came to Eastlake as this cool career move, which is very funny now. But it was like it felt like an opportunity to join this growing church and to be a part of like a church that's like kind of like cutting edge of like growth and all that stuff that I was really interested in. And um, I recognize that this, like now after years of kind of thinking about it, that I didn't really have any of my own questions about like my religion or even God, right? Like I had all of the answers. I was kind of trained up, and here's like what the Bible says about reality. Here's what the Bible says about God. This is all true. You can trust it. And I'd never really personally experienced doubt. I'd never really personally experienced any questions about what I was raised with. That doesn't mean that I hadn't heard them before. Like I'd heard of doubters. I'd heard of people
They
who might
exist
have
out
a
there.
question about God. And I was told the answer to those questions. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. There's an answer for all of them. And it sounds really silly now because like people have been debating God for millennia, and yet I was like, yeah, but I
27.
got all the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm 27, got all the answers. So anyways, what it kind of did was it humanized people with questions, right? I had to be around staff. I was obviously around Ryan, and I was like hearing these questions, and I was thinking about how many books we were assigned.
Mm-hmm.
Like EastLake forced me to learn. It forced me to read. It forced me to like read positions on things that I might not hold.
Yeah.
Like that was from day one. But I'm not talking before inclusion, just at the very beginning, right? Like it's like read this book on this, read this book on this way to do church, read this book on, like I had to read so much. I've never been a part of it. I'm still not in an organization that makes me read as much as I had to read at EastLake. So much reading, book
So much
assignments,
reading. Yeah.
yeah, book reports.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but essentially kind of like pushed the boundaries a little bit. Even think about how many speakers were brought in, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
bringing in speakers that are like asking questions that I'm just kind of soaking in this water of like learning how to think more critically about what I believe and do I believe that and why do I believe that?
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest piece that it taught me to see that like most of my beliefs were ones that I had simply inherited. I hadn't done any work to like critique or think of my own personal beliefs. I kind of just was given these beliefs that I into my operating system, and those are ones that I accepted. And he's like showed me that. It kind of showed me that you haven't really thought about these beliefs at all. You haven't questioned them once in your whole life. And ultimately this kind of showed some of my privilege too. Like Christianity worked for me, right?
Yeah.
Like being a straight white male, being somebody without challenges when it comes like lots of challenges. I had a lot of privilege, and it kind of showed up for me. I'm like, ooh, this is like, does my belief work for me or does it work for everybody? Like who does this kind of worldview not work for? And it kind of showed some of that piece, those pieces too. I didn't even think about like ultimately I kind of got to inclusion. I'm going to keep it and then I'll pause. But even before inclusion, which is what 2015, right? Like we were on this journey of I had to learn a ton, and I was starting to like learn to think a little bit more critically. And when inclusion happened, the journey towards inclusion, I will be the first to admit I was not charging the mountain of we need to go open and affirming. I was also not in the spot where I was resigning, which other people were doing, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I can't, we can't go down this path. So I was semi open to it, and having to like listen to other staff members who were more pro inclusion than
Mm-hmm.
I was. And I was kind of reflecting on that experience. It kind of just kind of forced me to like think through my position, research, read these different books. I had to attend these different inclusive churches. I had to listen to various kind of debates and talks on the topic. And then obviously when we like landed on we're going to be open, like affirming as a church, I just kind of had to come to the conclusion that, ooh, most of my beliefs, like that's kind of the first one that I realized that I'm now going to go against a belief that I had installed into my
Mm-hmm.
like software, right? Like I'm now going to like delete some beliefs out of my hard drive. And I just think that experience is one that I'm like eternally grateful for, because that like it's really scary the first time you do it, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel way more capable now to update my positions because I was kind of in the ecosystem where you were safe to do so. So that's
Yeah.
me rambling for a little bit, but that's the biggest one. I like got to see my worldview.
Yeah. Me too. And
Yeah.
I think I think it's interesting to note like everybody has inherited beliefs. That's what being a child is. You're learning from around your environment and you
Yeah.
just take it in. It's not like um but I do think it's the responsible way to live to acknowledge that
Yeah.
and say, "Oh, why was this handed to me? How
Hmm.
was it handed to me? And does this still ring true?"
Right.
And it takes courage to do that. And it also takes recognition that that's what happens.
Yeah. There are a couple things that kind of stood out to me as like ones like ideas that I want to take away from that.
Mhm.
Like seeing your worldview is one thing, but I feel like there's like even some more kind of granular practical things, because I realized one like part of that was I had a really tight knit like connection between my beliefs and my identity,
Mhm.
and Eastlake kind of disjointed those a little bit. Where now it's
Mm.
like, ooh, I'm viewing belief as something that I can update, change, as opposed to this is core to who I am. And I think that is really a scary feeling, right? Especially if you grew up really Christian and you're part of the in group. When that like beliefs become disjointed from your identity, you're like, who am I anymore? Like, is there any, like, I remember asking questions during deconstruction, like, what's my purpose in life now?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't have any purpose without this religion, which is obviously a very uncomfortable feeling. But to now be in the spot where I can feel like my identity is separate from like how, like what I believe about God, faith, spirituality, reality, and I can be open to kind of testing those, right? Even going some of the Adam Grant stuff, right? Like I can like think I can test my beliefs more like a scientist as opposed to needing to like be loyal to them because I was given them and I know that they're intrinsically true. That experience has created a lot of freedom for me. That my identity is less, it feels a little bit more secure because like the world's changing a lot. It's changed a lot in the last couple hundred years. And you aren't open to updating your belief. It can be really hard to live in this time. You said something that triggered a thought. Like Joel, my 9-year-old, said the other day, he was at school. We were watching the Seahawks game.
Oh my
And he
gosh,
says,
Joel is 9.
9.5 in a couple weeks. It's crazy. But he was sharing with me the other day. He's like, Dad, it's so weird. We're watching the game. He's like, can you believe it? There's a kid at school and he's a huge Steelers fan. Like, why can you even imagine that there's a kid at my school who loves the Steelers? And we were having a little discussion on it. And I said, why do you think he's a Steelers fan? And we were kind of going back and forth, and I was trying to lead him. And I'm like, why do you think he's a Steelers fan? Like, probably because his dad's a Steelers fan. I'm like, why are you a Seahawks fan? Because your dad's a Seahawks fan, right? So like again, a lot of those things like you just kind of you're raised with it, you're nostalgic towards it for the most part. If it was semi-positive, you're open to it, right? Obviously, there's beliefs that we reject because they were super negative and harmful. But if it wasn't super negative and harmful, and Christianity wasn't for me, it feels like it works pretty well, right? So to kind of recognize though, like that's kind of what EastLake taught me is like, ooh, those are just inherited beliefs. I haven't really thought through, questioned, or like considered different positions on it. Was a really, really helpful one. I feel like going through the EastLake journey, noticing my worldview, it just helped me notice how often I didn't consider other people's perspective. And I think one of the big conclusions that I've kind of arrived at now that I do hold loosely, but it kind of helps create a sense of like stability for me, is that I think reality is best found in community. And what I mean by that is like we're all really biased people. I'm biased because I've had my upbringing, my worldview, all these things that I've experienced. You have your experiences. And if we both assume that we're living in the same reality, I think, meaning not just I have my perspective, I don't think most people think that way. We think my beliefs are who I am, my thoughts are who I am, and my perspective is reality. That's kind of how I came to EastLake. And I was kind of jolted out of that to recognize, ooh, I have my own biases and my own perspective. And what I mean by reality is formed in community, I mean, like my best chance at living with the least amount of delusion and removing as much bias as possible is to thoughtfully consider your position, to thoughtfully consider 8 other people's positions who have different backgrounds, different religions, different upbringings, different orientations, different beliefs. And I can kind of mosh pit those together into realizing like the conglomeration of those is probably the closest thing to reality that I can arrive at. So anyways, that was a crazy thing to start to like learn. That happened because of EastLake.
Yeah.
Do you disagree with that?
I don't disagree with that. I'm thinking about one of the points that I have, and I might just say it now because it's similar. Let me get my notes. I think one of the things that I learned similarly is, and you said like the experience of reality. I also think of that in experience of truth, or just experience is not objective. The truth of something is always relative to one's experience of it. This, and I don't know if that's kind of the similar thing of what you were saying. This lesson was life-changing for me, where I thought that we all experienced the same circumstances, or like you and I go to a meeting and my thought is we experience the same thing because it's what happened.
Yep.
And I learned through so many like things at Eastlake that there's just a perspective from each person on what actually has happened.
Mm-hmm.
This, I mean, and I shared this a little vulnerably because I think some people are like, yeah.
I know.
But
Some
it
of my
was,
reflections are embarrassing.
I
Like
know.
it took me 30 years to learn that.
Yes, but I'm like, this shaped me immensely. I think about my marriage where like Andy and I can experience something. And I used to think that one thing that we experienced was non-negotiably the way that I saw it.
Right.
And if he experienced it differently, then that was incorrect.
Correct.
And I had to show him, like, no, that's not what happened.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think about that in all of life circumstance. I have a perspective now of like curiosity for how others may be experiencing the same thing as me
Mm-hmm.
and how different that might be. And that is life. That has been life changing for me because I thought there was only one way to see an experience. And I'm not talking about like necessary beliefs. I'm talking about, we had so many things on, like, I think about a staff meeting where like I experienced it like this. So that's what happened. And the reality is someone else sitting there probably experienced it differently and it happened then differently for them.
Yeah.
And being able to see life that way and recognize that my experience is not the
Objective reality.
experience, is not objective reality.
I know. That is jolting though. The first time you like doubt. I do think that is grounded, like the idea that our worldview, our religion holds objective reality was like infused into at least how I was raised. And the kids came home the other day and they were they were singing one of the Marshall, I can't remember, Marshall or Joel was singing an empathy rap and he was like you're just like empathy and joy, sadness, like going through all these different feelings. Like, and Marshall's like explaining what empathy is to me. He's like 7. I'm like, I don't think I understood what empathy was until I like was 30. I don't think I could have given a good definition. Maybe I could have like just like like the verbal definition of it. But I was thinking like ultimately, how can you empathize if you with another person's experience if you hold objective reality in
Mm-hmm.
your right, like you're just going to judge them and say they're idiots or they're wrong, and that's a lot of how I
Yeah.
was raised, right? Is like if you don't think like me,
Mm-hmm.
you're either not very smart, which is a family problem, by the way, like the little arrogant thing, or you're just mistaken, like you can't help it, like you were raised ignorant. Not like to empathize would be like there's a chance that their experience is 100% true, like
Yeah.
to start with that as like the generous default is what empathy is, right?
Yeah.
Imagine what that feels like to go through that, and I don't think I was able to learn that until you kind of disjoint like the idea that your personal experience is reality, like
Yeah.
until you get out of that mode it's hard to empathize.
Um, Please can you record that empathy rap and send it to me?
Seriously. Seriously, I was very impressed. I'm like, that's one, you just listed up like 12 feelings, that's really cool, and like just fun,
Yeah. I know I'm
they're
sure.
teaching
I
that in
want,
public school.
please send me a
Good job.
video of Marshall.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Kind of tied to this is I
Yeah,
think
you go another one, go.
my one of my biggest lessons that I'm taking away is just my relationship with certainty.
Mm,
Um, so life is by its very nature mysterious and chaotic. I have discovered. We are souls living in these human bodies and it's chaotic. I have also learned about myself. I don't like mystery and chaos. So I have learned through my just this experience of a different way of living, which is embracing uncertainty. So learning about how to deal with the fact that life is mysterious and chaotic. I don't like mystery and chaos.
Okay.
Is
That'd be terrifying life.
probably the greatest lesson of life that I will learn that EastLake helped me deal with. But I would say religion capitalizes on the desire for certainty.
Yeah.
I'm not sure everybody has that, but I think we do as a human species. We want to know what's happening. We need to deal, no one likes feeling that way. So I think religion is like, oh, you're feeling uncertain. Here is the answer to all of life's questions. Here's the answer to eternity. Here is all these answers, which is very grounding in
Now
the
I know.
middle of chaos.
Yeah, totally.
I have this memory of I hired one of my best friends still to this day, Alicia. I hired her at one point to work at EastLake. And I remember in the interview process, she had said change is hard for her. And I was like, you realize you're applying to work at EastLake. Tell me
Yeah.
how that's going to work. And she said, if it is consistent that EastLake is always changing, then I can deal with that. And I was like, oh, that's such a remarkable way of looking at it. And so what
Totally.
I have found is that if I can be certain that life is full of uncertainty,
Right.
I can manage that better. And I've found that life is uncertain. And I can be certain of that. But for someone like me, religion worked for the first part of my life. Those answers worked and gave me groundedness that I needed until it started to not work. Until I started to have experiences that didn't match up with what I professed to believe. And I think EastLake broke me of this, like, you know, I'm right. This is the only way. I have the answers, into a place of living more open-handedly.
Yeah.
That has been like a radical transformation where I can hold certain beliefs and I can question them and I can look at them. I can let certain ones go and not have it, you know, rock me. And then I think also because of that, then certain ones can come back. Like I can be like, I'm just very much, if I'm not holding so tightly to something that needs to be right, if I'm more relaxed and holding my hands open, I just have this freedom to look and I can question. And there's safety in that, which is so interesting to me. This ability to acknowledge, like, well, I could be wrong. I still have things to learn. These are things that I'm like aspiring to be still.
Yeah.
It's always like a work in progress, but that's been one of the most radical shifts for me, is relaxing into this. I really don't think anything can be known for sure, but I can find groundedness in these things, whatever those things are. It's a much more relaxing way to live. It's way less fearful. It was so interesting before, like I had certainty, but I was still so scared of getting it wrong, and now I have uncertainty and I feel more peace.
More peace. Yeah.
It's so weird.
It is interesting, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like, I mean, the loss of certainty, and maybe it's not even loss of certainty, because maybe it's the loss of the illusion of certainty, right? Because it's not like, I don't know, it's fascinating, right? Because you either have to kind of bury your head in the sand to sleep peacefully, right? Which at some point you lose. Like I lost it, right? Like the questions, I heard enough questions. I was like, actually, these questions aren't just his anymore. I kind of have my own questions now, right? you're like, that guy's got questions, man. He's got doubts. And then you're like, well, actually, he makes some reasonable points. We have doubts now, right? Um, which is why they call it a slippery slope. But it's fascinating um the bit about sleeping more peacefully, or at least having a bit more peace. Like, I think that feels a little bit more in alignment with reality, right? So the idea that admitting that there's certainty probably feels a little bit more, excuse me, admitting that there's uncertainty, that is chaotic and mysterious, and like having space for that probably feels just a little more intellectually honest, which then allows you to like kind of, okay, so if things are uncertain and chaotic, how do I manage that? And so expecting the uncertainty is a part of that. I just think it's fascinating.
Yeah. I find it too, it's really helpful with parenting. I just feel really fine with being like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what I think about that. I used to think this, and now I maybe feel like I think that. What does that sound like to you, 8-year-old?
Yeah, totally.
Rather than being like, well, this is what happens when you die. I
Yeah.
just, or whatever the question is.
Yeah.
I feel so much more safe being like, it's a great question. Here's what I think right now.
Yeah.
And that could change.
Yeah.
It feels easier to me now, which is remarkable because that's
Yeah.
not my personality. That's
Right.
not the way I used to exist in the world.
Yeah.
And that feels like a radical change.
Yeah. Something that you triggered, or in a positive way, not not like an emotional
I
trigger.
triggered you.
Something that you reminded me that I do feel like EastLake kind of required or initiated this change that allows like the default response to be a question. Like when there's new information, I think the previous response would have been some resistance, some rejection, um, an answer. Like when somebody asks you what you believe, you respond with like, "Here's my answer." Always have an answer, right? It was kind of the verse that we were taught. Always have an answer to explain what you believe. And the default now is to ask a question, like, "Ooh, like how did you arrive at your position, or what is informing your position, or give me some background on that." Even I was just thinking about with kids, right? You mentioned with kids, like when the kids come home, or one of them says, like, "Hey, he said the S word." Like, what is the S word, right? Because I learned really early that the S word isn't what I thought the S word was, right? The S word is like was stupid, and I was being very, very presumptive of what the S word was. But like you have to ask the question to like actually get to reality. So anyways, I just think that that's a better posture to have towards new information, which is constant. Is
Yeah.
let me ask a couple clarifying questions before I respond.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, what's another one? 'Cause I only have like three. Mine are like big and
I know mine
can
are
go
long.
meander a bunch of them. So I think
I have
you
more.
probably have more shorter ones.
I would say the probably one of the biggest things I'm taking from this experience is that nothing is more important than the people you choose to do life with. Um, I think so much like we can laugh about these like radical shifts that we've had. It was so scary. Those changes were so scary. And I could have never done it if I didn't feel safe with the people who were standing right next to me. And in our conversation with Michelle, I talked about that, like Are We Out of the Woods Yet song from Taylor Swift, who I love and should work into every conversation we talk about Taylor Swift.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm the same with Travis Kelce.
I should have worn my shirt. I have a shirt that says "Karma is my tight end." Okay, sorry, I got distracted. I think about that time, in particular, the after inclusion, how dark that was.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately after, and I picture us in these dark woods where we can't see anything, and it's the group of us, and it was so scary. Well, everything was like kind of crumbling down around us, and how I said to Michelle in our conversation, like now I look back and I would be like, let's go back to the woods. And it's because of the people that we were with. now I'm like, I'll bring the marshmallows and we'll build a
Yeah.
fire. If I could just have those moments in the darkness with the people who I love the most, um, I would do it again. And but even more than that, like I look at the amazing people I met along the way, people who attended Eastlake and sacrificed, gave so
Yeah.
much, showed up, worked in the childcare rooms, took care of my kids. Um, there was this life that was flowing through whatever this place was, and people cared so much. Um, and it's an experience I will never forget, and I don't know that I'll have it again.
Yeah.
I hope to. I think we said this in
Yeah. I
one of
hope
our other
so.
conversations. I think about the Drinks for Drinks, that charity water event that we did, and
You like own that, right? Like you had
uh,
all the details. I'm like, yeah.
yeah, I ran that event, but I think about like all it was like this example of like everybody giving their best.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think like Griffin Campbell was making water filters in his backyard and
Right.
Jonah was building that stage. And I asked my friend Jen, can you please manage how to check in 3,000 people? No problem. I like Sarah, we're going to have this many donations. We're trying to raise this much money. Can you figure out how to do that? No problem. I mean, what problems, but I'll
Yeah.
take care of those
Like
problems. Like
I'm on it.
this, like linking arms with amazing people is an experience I'll never forget.
Yeah. That's on my list too. I was reflecting like being on the team in an environment where it didn't feel like anyone was checked out. Like
Mm-hmm.
it didn't like that's hard. And I have like it's like it's hard. Like there's very I can't remember a time, or at least it wasn't consistent where it was like that's not my job. Like it wasn't like that's somebody else's role. Like it was a very very much an all hands on deck kind of culture.
Yeah.
And it was also a culture of like it wasn't like hey it's 5 o'clock like I'm out. And I'm not saying that in like a every like that's the only good environment you could ever work in. It's like there's healthy environments where you can check out and you can clock out, but like the momentum and like the vibe of like we are in this together, we're together in this, is was really beautiful, and it was energizing and it was exciting, and it was something that I'll miss.
Um, I think in relation to that in the people area, I think Eastlake also taught me how to find my people.
Mm,
And I think as Eastlake is shutting down, my hope is that other people learn that too.
yeah.
Like, um, do you know how to find people to do life with? And we showed people. I mean, we had at one point there was like 270 groups you could join, nothing crazy like
Right.
that in its heyday. But like the importance of finding people who have similar values, who want to do the same things as you, who want to raise kids like you. Like Eastlake taught me how to find people um, who also will challenge me and push back on me. Like all the things that I need, I feel like for a healthy community, I found and I learned how to do at Eastlake. And I was laughing because I'm like, even the people who ended up being super mad at us,
Yeah.
they found community too.
Totally. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
We banded you
We,
together with all of your
we,
like-minded friends.
yes, you were able to band together and find a common purpose and passion. And good for you. I hope you're still friends with those people and have found, continue to go on with that passion and purpose that you feel. Um, yeah, I guess to anyone who is listening, I hope that you've learned the importance of community and
Yeah.
how much you need it and that you find it because I'm so thankful I found mine.
Yeah. I think it's a good one. I'm gonna miss that part. East Lake facilitated some really easy connection points, and it was also kind kind of an environment where it was common to be able to talk about your values. And like
Mm.
now we're in like I'm in kids sports zone and I'm in like elementary school window. I'm like in those environments, you're not like, how do you see the world, right? Like you don't ask those questions. You're like, hey, we have similar seasons because our kids are the same age. So now you kind of chit chat about mostly family and such. But I think being in an environment where kind of the point of being around EastLake was to kind of look at your worldview and to consider your values and to live meaningfully and be challenged with a talk, and like you can chit chat about this talk that like
Mhm.
is about your values and about God and faith and spirituality and reality. Like it facilitates pretty deep connections, and I do feel like there's a gap in some ways because I
Mhm.
don't have that to the same degree. Um, but I'm glad that we had it because I think we can. It's easier to like kind of go find it again once you've experienced it.
It's easier to recognize.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
There's that feeling of when I found myself in the midst of people
Yeah.
who I really love and care about and who love and care about me. That's like an incredible feeling.
Yeah.
And I want that. I want that for people.
Yeah. It's good. Okay. Want me to go with one of mine?
Yeah.
Okay. Second one that was coming to my brain. And I think obviously this again speaks to my bias, but I love the topic of leadership.
Mm.
I find it to be interesting in general. I studied it, right, at Gonzaga, and want to be a good leader. I want, as much as I want to be a good leader, I want to be led by good leaders even more because being around good leaders is awesome. And if you've ever been led by a bad leader, you know how important good leadership is. And as I look back on the last decade, I am just thankful for the leadership incubator that EastLake was. Like I have learned so much, and I went through this little phase of annoyance when I was shifting out of church world. I'm like, good God, like I have a degree from Hogwarts. Like I don't have like any experience that's going to translate to corporate world. Like how am I ever going to like make the shift? And so I went through this like resentment window where I'm like, dang it, like the church world isn't going to translate. And it was hard to make the shift. But now that I've been able to kind of shift life and detach my career from my thoughts about this mysterious, chaotic universe and God, faith, spirituality, and I don't no longer need to build my career around that. I am so grateful for what I've learned. And I would say this about being in a church in general, but EastLake especially. I think all of my church experience was translated because you just kind of you have to be a leader. It takes a lot of work and it's challenging to get volunteers. It's challenging to lead. I mean, I had to lead team meetings. I had to do one-on-ones, coaching conversations, hire people, fire people. Would not say that it all goes well, but the learning experience was really, really like foundational. I was thinking even through some of like just the principles that I still use in my current job, right? Yes, language was something we had to learn at EastLake,
Yeah.
right? The difference between a sign that says go around versus can't wait to see you next door, right? Like the difference in like how you position things.
I use that
The,
with my kids all
yes,
the time. I'm like,
all the
Kristen,
time.
yes, language. Like
Yeah,
instead of being like, no,
right.
so like we could do
Exactly.
that later.
Yes,
We
exactly.
could do
There's
that
lots of ways to
after.
do it.
There's
Uh-huh.
so many ways to be positive, and I notice it in company now. I notice it in companies, signage
Yeah.
and language and all of those things. I'm like, oh, kind of a no way to
Such a
say it.
negative way to
Such a
say it,
negative
right?
way to
Cash
say that.
only.
Yeah.
Cash only, right? That's like all the different things. We're going to charge you a 3% fee. Like, there's a nicer way to say that. Anyways, but
Yeah.
East like taught me that. Eat the frog is still like the idea,
Oh,
right? Broccoli before ice cream. The whole
eat the
idea.
frog. That is also something I learned now. For people who don't know what eat the frog is, let's explain it because it is one of
Yeah.
life's big lessons I take with me from East. Like eat the frog. I taught it to Andy recently. So eat the frog is the idea like if someone tells you you have to eat this frog, what do you do? And kind of the idea is you could sit and stare at the frog and be like, I don't want to eat it. Ooh, I bet it's going to be slimy. Maybe there's different ways I could eat it. I wonder if I should do this, but I'm going to wait an hour and see if I feel better about it. But the reality is you're going to have to eat the frog. So just eat the frog and be done with it and move on. Right? That's my
Yeah.
recollection of eat the frog. Is that your
Yeah,
recollection?
for sure. And the way I see it is I kind of view it just from a productivity standpoint too. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can waste an entire day
Yeah.
like thinking about and brainstorming how to do the hard part of your day. But like one of the productivity principles of EastLake is like do the hardest thing on your list before 10 a.m.
Yep.
Right?
Eat the
Whatever's
frog.
the hardest part of your day, get that done. Eat the frog before 10 a.m. And then like suddenly your brain is freed up to do
Yeah.
all these other things. So if you have a tough conflict conversation you have to have, if you've been meaning to respond to this stupid email and you know you need to type it out and like think whatever the hardest part of your day is, get that done before lunch.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a principle that I still talk to my people about. I still help them
Hmm.
get through that because we're all the same. Believe the best is so huge, right? Whenever there's a gap between expectations and experience, we decide what to fill the gap with, right? Kristen, I call you, you don't answer 6 times in a row. I could be like so mad. She's ignoring me again. She's doing XYZ, right? All these reasons why you're the problem. Or I could like come up with a generous explanation of what's going on and what we do with the gaps. There's constant gaps in our relationships. And like thinking about marriage, parenting,
Hmm.
work, my boss, my employee, there's constant gaps in how we fill the gap with either trust,
Hmm.
believing the best, or suspicion is the like it erodes downward or builds upward. So anyway, love that principle.
Love that
Very,
one.
very helpful. Anyways, so many leadership principles,
Hmm.
systems, right? We had like just so many conflict conversations that I had to have, right? Like keyboard
Hmm.
courage was this principle that we had so much, like we would get so many emails. This is before inclusion. We got so many mean emails about like there's not enough Bibles and whatever, or there's, you don't do communion enough, or like the sacrilegious, right? Somebody swore on stage, right? Like whatever email we would get, and like to have to then like the coaching that we got to how to navigate those conversations,
Hmm.
and to like just to learn how to like de-escalate. And obviously there's plenty of examples of escalating those that didn't go well. But I'm just thankful for that experience because it's really important for how we navigate conflict now, whether in a personal life or my professional life. Speaking publicly, leading meetings, performance management, managing, crafting emails, to try
Hmm.
to communicate a point. I think all of that is just really, really important experience that now that I have the benefit of retrospect, I have tons of gratitude for. Um, but just so many leadership principles in general that I think are infused in me. One of them being like take 100% responsibility for your life, right? The idea that like if there's a baby that winds up on your doorstep, no, it's not your fault, but suddenly it is your responsibility, right? Like what are you going to do with the baby that's on your doorstep? That's an example of a principle I recounted this week to somebody in our org, and like that was like I wouldn't have ever been exposed to that unless I'd been working at EastLake. So tons and tons of gratitude for all the leadership principles that he's like introduced me to.
Yeah, me too. Um, and I'm happy to see that it wasn't for Eastlake. It's just leadership in general, how
Yeah,
to um, lead through your life in ways that are positive and beneficial and helpful to other people,
yeah,
not just how to get your way.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Good. Okay, what else is on your list? I only got one more after this, but it's really long.
Oh, okay.
Not really long. It's just like like all my other long-winded ones.
Hmm. Um, this is like one that everybody knows, but I just want to state publicly that I learned it.
Yeah,
Cliches are cliches for a reason. And I think I solidly affirm this as being true that the hardest times lead to the greatest lessons and progress.
yeah,
Um, these cliches formed in the fire, the crucible of life. I discovered that to be true.
yeah,
Almost all of the positive lessons I have learned came from the hardest things that we went through. And there were lots of hard times because of decisions we made, because of mistakes that we
yeah,
made. But regardless, we found ourselves in hard places. And I think you find yourself in these dark places and it's so vulnerable. You're so just, I just picture us just sitting there looking up like, what did we just do?
yeah,
um, but in that vulnerability is where, where you grow. if I were to say, like, it's where God meets you. That place where everything has been torn down and you're in a dark moment. And then you get up and you move forward and you keep going and you grow and you've learned something. Again, it's very cliche, but I can just say that EastLake solidified that for me as something that I have learned. And I look at it and I'm like, oh, you know what that is? It's hope.
Mm.
And I think I'm just figuring this out now as I talk to you, that hope meant something different to me when I came to EastLake. And I did a message on this, that I have like a weird relationship with that word.
Mm.
Um, but I feel like if I can remember all that we went through, and I find myself where I am now, it's very hopeful. And I guess I want to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing it's not the last time I'm going to find myself in like a dark place,
Right.
looking up, looking around, wondering, what did I just do? Or what just happened? And if I can remember, I've been here before. And I don't want to, I don't want to be the person that is like, oh, there's always something positive that comes from every situation. I don't think that. But I have learned and I have grown from probably every situation that I've been in, that I would recall as being like a negative or a darker kind of memory. And so I'm really grateful for the idea, a refined idea of what hope can look like.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I agree with, I don't think it's cliche. I don't know. Maybe it's just part of getting older and that you have to experience more hardship to know, to kind of, to start to be grateful for it. Like you have to like, you have to have enough distance behind it too, right? Because anybody who's in the midst of hardship doesn't want to hear, hey, eventually you're going to love it, right?
You're going to learn a lesson.
Yeah. And I think there can be a lot of damage done there, right? Like you
Yes.
should consider it, pure joy. It can feel like a bit of a
Minimizing.
trope,
Mm-hmm.
minimization, right? But I'm with you in that now, having experienced what I've experienced, and with the passage of time and hopefully some maturation, you can just be more hopeful when you're in the midst of it, of current challenges, that eventually there will be some more gratitude for it and more perspective on it.
I have two more, so I'll do one. This one I was thinking about more recently, just that in the end, I am responsible for my own growth.
Mm.
Institutions like church can help. And I deeply, deeply hope that we have been helpful. But our faith and our spirituality is our own, and it's up to us. And we're in this unusual time where there's great, huge shifts happening within the institution of church. We're watching it. Yeah. We're part of it. We're shutting down. It's fascinating to watch, and I'm interested to see what happens. There's a major shift happening with the institution of church. But I hope people have learned through their experience at EastLake, their disappointment with EastLake, that in the end, it's you. Your faith, your spirituality, like you were just talking about your lesson of like the baby on the doorstep too, that I guess that kind of ties in. It's up to you. So find the things that work for you, find the things that help you, and then leave when those things are no longer helpful. when it's your
Mhm.
time to move on with grace and appreciation and an excitement for something new.
Yeah.
And I think back at some of the people that I can think of that did that with Eastlake, and I'm so grateful for the example of um, how to be a part of something and then how to move on. I think Ryan taught us that too, of just like I had the instinct of like we want to keep people here, and he was always like, "No, let people go,"
Right.
because Eastlake is just a part of
Yep.
the journey. It's something to stop in at, and like the revolving door that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And I think,
Plus, you can't control people, right? Like the illusion of like we had to lose control of people, right? I think church facilitated that, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm so thankful that in the end, I have learned this is my responsibility. There is
Yeah.
no guru, teacher,
Yeah.
anyone who can do this for me. Um, and I think I will always, I'm thankful that I will always be able to look myself in the mirror and to say, like, I tried my hardest.
Mm.
I did my best to create a place that helped people grow in grace and love. And I know you did too.
Yeah.
Um, but in the end, that's all we can do is try to create these environments, but it's up to everyone to do their own work. We can't do it for you.
Yeah. I think that's a good reminder, a good point. I think it's easy in church space, and I would say it was easy for us to do this too. I'm not saying like church attenders do this, but we can outsource a lot of like the thinking, like going to a service, like was this like I did a thing for my spirituality this week, or like I did this for God and God's like proud of me, or attending or donating, whatever. So there can be kind of this outsourced responsibility on the church to facilitate our growth, our, you know, the check boxes. And I think one, like I think we could do that even with Ryan, right? Like I'm not going on my own journey because Ryan is for me. So thanks for doing that and whatever, right? And I can either respond with tons of resistance or I can fully embrace. But like regardless, I'm not actually going doing my own work. I'm just letting somebody else be this person on my behalf. And so I do agree with you, and I think that's a really helpful takeaway. To own it, we got to own it.
Well, especially now as we're like wrapping this thing
Yeah,
up. Like
yeah,
it's a reminder to me. Like I'm no longer putting together thoughts for other people.
right,
What am I
yeah,
gonna do
yep,
now?
yep,
And it's on me.
yep. That's good.
Yeah. Okay, so last two doors and then
Yeah, I'll do my last one. Ultimately, I think as I was kind of thinking, like the other one, it kind of fits in under the umbrella of I'm just glad I got to experience like this life cycle of East Lake. When I joined, like it was, I didn't get to start, I didn't get to plant East Lake. I wasn't a part of the very early stages, but I joined one location. I mean, I guess I am, even though I didn't get to plant, I am like helping pour the last like little bit of dirt at the funeral on it, right? Like I'm helping shut it down. But just to be a part of all of the experiences, to like be there on an Easter Sunday with 5,000 people. And I was also like attending a post COVID event where we're like, I'm not sure this has as much legs as we thought maybe it does, right? Um, I got to personally experience like helping lead a community that we did something that we felt was right, and we experienced like the backlash of that. Like it wasn't popular in that culture at the time. Um, and I think that was probably for the first time in my life where like I was recognizing that Christianity didn't work for me. Like it's like I mean, that's embarrassing to say, but like as this like straight white male Christian dude who like was living my life, I was like the first time I experienced even like a tinge of like persecution or venom or backlash. I was like, hey, I don't like that.
does it feel good?
And but like right, it didn't feel good, but like I got to experience it, and like
Yeah.
having experienced it makes like it changes you to experience that.
Mhm.
um I was forced to, and like not forced to, but I was in an environment that like required or asked me to, um like I had to like think about what I believed a lot. like you mentioned, like you're not preparing messages anymore, but like being required to prepare messages and like have to like stand publicly in front of people and say what you think you believe
Mhm.
is a really formational like experience. It's scary. I noticed like now that I don't do it, I realize, ooh, I was pretty anxious about it, and I don't like didn't feel good to admit that because that felt like weakness, but I didn't really enjoy that part of of the gig. But I'm thankful now for like the experience of being required to like really be that thoughtful about my beliefs, because I think it could be, had I not had to go through that experience, I could see myself just kind of floating down the river of whatever I was handed and not being as thoughtful with what I believed. So I had to think about it, and then I had to say it publicly. And I was thinking about too, like not just that, like I was a part of like the team during an evangelical phase of EastLake where we're like baptizing people after a message on hell. Like there's like this long line of a
Mhm.
couple hundred people that got baptized after that talk. And I'm helping baptize those people, right? And I'm like, winning them for the kingdom, right? It was a big celebration at the time. And then like 4 years later, I stood on stage and shared my personal experience that I don't think hell is literal anymore. I think most of Jesus' story is metaphorical. And I like had to do both. I've done both of those experiences. I've celebrated saving souls from hell. And then years later, said, I don't think hell is literal. And like that experience is also pretty formational, because not only to say out what you believe, but I've now said, I don't believe things I used to believe out loud in public. And I think that's a really important thing. I think it's an important skill. Like I want all humans to kind of experience that, because I think it creates a little less attachment to your ego. I'm not saying by any means that I don't have an ego. I'm just more aware of like, ooh, my ego is flaring up right now, right? It's like I'm aware of it as opposed to it being like just intrinsically, kind of who I am. I'm like noticing it when I'm getting like my ego's acting out. And I feel like it just helped me be a little bit less fragile, when and maybe a little less easily offended, because I've had to admit mistakes. I've had to apologize a lot because of EastLake, and I've had to have conversations that I'm like embarrassed of now, right? I've told people, or coached people towards things that I no longer find to be likely in their best interest, and like that, going through that experience has been a humbling one. um, and I think just the more times you've said, I was wrong, the less it hurts every time you say it. Right? Like, but if you never have gotten that muscle worked out, it feels like a major injury the first time you have to say it. Right. So all of those experiences overall, I just feel like going back to even some of the pain and hardship, and like thinking through, having gratitude that I've had to apologize, having gratitude that had conversations that I regret, having gratitude that I've said I celebrated souls for the kingdom and then said I don't believe that anymore. I think that just has that kind of helped me mature a bit. That's how I view it, and it's helped me have more clarity on things I do and don't believe, and more awareness of from my ego and how it's contributed to some mistakes in my past. And I just have a lot of gratitude for going through that whole life cycle that Eastlake facilitated for me. So
Yeah, it was a life cycle for sure.
yeah,
I agree with the being forced to say out loud. For someone like me who lives a lot in my head, that was one of the biggest challenges I had on staff, was
yeah,
having to speak. I remember I did a message where I made people write down what they believe. Do you remember that?
yeah,
I had
yeah.
paper passed out, and I was like, "You guys do this. It's
No,
hard."
this is not my job for you. You were just preaching that message already, right? Like this is on you. How am I supposed to know what you believe? Well, I was thinking about me when you were saying like that is helpful for you, but I was thinking like from my perspective, I'm like such a like achiever, want people to think I'm awesome, want to be liked, want to feel like I'm everybody's like nice guy, and I don't want to offend anybody. And so like, nope, I've done all of those things. I have not achieved, right? We're like I have failed. I have said things I regret. I've said out loud things I no longer hold. I have offended people. Like all of those things are like soul crushers for me. You know what I mean? And so having gone through it, it's just I'm like, I don't want to go through it again, but I'm glad I have the experience at least a little bit.
I feel like I want to have that be one of our cuts. That's one of our
Four
clips for
crushes for
sure.
me.
Peter being like, I did this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. I'm gonna
Good.
request that Stern King cut that for us.
That could be a
Uh,
good one.
not cut it out, cut it as like a clip to promote this conversation. Um, I think my final one that I'm so thankful for. This was something that Ryan said years and years ago. But the idea that everything is spiritual. When I first came to Eastlake, spirituality was something that I did. It was Bible knowledge, specific prayers. It was saving people. It was going to an experience on Sundays. And there was a separation. I think I would have said then, no, this is who I am. But it existed separately for me. And now I think spirituality, I do really believe that everything is spiritual now. Spirituality for me is the way I think, the way I parent, the way I wife, or however the verb, whatever the verb of wife or friend. The spirituality is the way I invest my time, the way I care for other people, the way I treat strangers, the way I approach our environment. All of it is an act of love and appreciation and gratitude for what God has given me. Yeah. This life, this idea that life is a gift, is itself a spiritual way to look at things. And I get overwhelmed. I'm like, look at this beautiful life. Sure, it's messy and difficult and hard. It's also lovely and full of wonder and awe. And I look at Eastlake and I'm like, Eastlake was all of those things too. Just a reflection of life, the ups and downs, the mistakes, the highs, the lows. And I just have so much gratitude for it all. I'm just so grateful. There, I'm done. Those are my lessons.
Those are good lessons. I love all those lessons. The only other one that I was thinking, I mean, we could probably wrap, right? Just kind of our last little things we want to end with, or do you have any other thoughts you want to share?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure I do. I'm sure I'm gonna hit end recording and I'm gonna be like, dang it, I didn't say this or
that's
that.
Okay. That's okay. I think a theme of gratitude, right? I think that's obviously why we've been for years now resonating with life as a gift and love is the point, right? Just to, hopefully people hear that as we're even sharing this. It's like gratitude for this chapter, this season. But I was thinking through too, like just a thank you to everybody who made Eastlake. I think Eastlake wasn't created by Ryan and wasn't created by us. It was this combination of factors, right? And a season, and it was like a living organism, right? We talked about how and it changed a lot, right? And it had a life, death, burial, all those things that living things do have. But I just hope people hear a resounding gratitude from me, from us, that like, thank you for how it contributed to my life. I am a different human being than I was in 2011 when I joined, and I have so much gratitude for how Eastlake shaped and changed me as a result of being on the team. I don't have like a perspective on Eastlake that it was perfect and that we nailed it in every single way, but I do have the perspective of gratitude for what it was. I think I've shared this before, but like I do honestly feel like Eastlake provided a form of salvation for me. I didn't feel like I came to Eastlake assuming I knew what that was. I just felt tons of gratitude for everybody who helped create Eastlake. I don't think Eastlake was created by Ryan. I know he certainly didn't want to be just this known as a figurehead leader that was in charge or by himself leading this place by as an individual. I don't take full responsibility for what Eastlake was from my behalf on our behalf. We were part of a leadership team for a chapter, not even for like all of it by any means, right? For like a window of it. but I one of the things that stands out to me, and why I feel so grateful for what Eastlake's done in my life is I honestly feel like I experienced like a form of salvation by being a part of Eastlake. I came to Eastlake trying to save people who weren't Christian, and it feels like I got saved from a worldview that was really infused with fear. I'm leaving feeling like I was one of the people that got saved as a result. Like I once was lost, but now I'm fine. Like this level of like light bulb going on in my life, I never experienced that before. I've never experienced something like I experienced at Eastlake, which feels kind of like getting saved, I think. Like I could have passed down a shame-inducing worldview, with in groups and out groups, and fundamentalists believe like me or else God's gonna potentially kill you, torture you in the next life, depending on how you think. I could have kept that train rolling, and I feel like Eastlake set me free to just love, and to love wastefully and generously without fear of um, like doing it wrong. So I was kind of I thought I was loving before, and I feel like, oh, I didn't quite understand what that looked like until I got to experience what Eastlake did. And so I just hope for everybody listening that you hear tons of gratitude from me, like for everybody who donated, for everybody who served, for everybody who went on this journey, right? All of us have gone on this journey, and some of it, for some people, it was a shorter journey. For others, it was a longer journey. But like the living organism that was Eastlake wasn't created because of you and I and Ryan or like a handful of people. It was created because there's this entire community that was building it together. And so like my life is drastically different as a result. And I just have so much great gratitude for that. So I hope people hear um, that I've loved this chapter. I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of Eastlake. I'm proud that I've been a part of this team. I think of Eastlake a little bit like some of like the art I've done. I've done like some watercolor paintings, or I think of my kids like drawing. We do little art stuff. And is it like the greatest ever? Is it like the Sistine Chapel? No, no, not at all. It's not close. But I'm proud of it because like we worked our asses off, we did our best, and we grew a ton. And I feel like we loved well. And the personal growth is something that I wouldn't trade for anything. So I'm very proud to have been a part of this team.
Me too. Yeah, I'm so proud of what we did. Yeah, there's things I would do differently. But those situations also made me who I am today. So, and there is no going back. I think too, I used this analogy the other day of like, I feel like I'm standing in this big room. Maybe in my mind, it's not Montevilla. I feel like I'm standing in this big warehouse and I'm just like sweeping up,
Right.
doing the final things to like shut this thing down, to lay it to rest. And again, I feel like I'm just standing there with, I picture myself, I'm just in this empty, really large room, just standing there looking around being like, oh, I'm so thankful. And as I kind of like sweep and sweep and put the final things in the trash and turn out the lights, I'm full of gratitude. And I also recognize I'm not alone because you're there too.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure this is the place, but Peter, I'm so thankful for you. There's no one else who's been like a part of everything that I've seen and experienced, except you and Andy and Brittany.
Yeah.
But there's probably other times for this, but thank you. Thanks for being such a good friend. And for doing this, like just linking arms and seeing what it could be for 13 years,
Yeah.
There was a lot of like, what can this be? And that's a beautiful thing to do with other people. And I'm really thankful for you.
Thanks for saying that. I feel the same way. Like I said, thank you to just everybody, but You're very high on the list, Kristen, of people who've gone on the journey. Like, thanks for being willing to go on this journey together. Thanks for trying so hard, like thinking so much about Eastlake for so long. I don't think anyone has thought as much about Eastlake in the last couple of years as us, and just all of that work is so appreciated. And even more than that, like I know that if I didn't like you, and if we didn't have our own friendship, that this would have been wrapped a long time ago. So I'm just so thankful for the friendship that I got as a result of all this work. Um, I love you. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate all your investment in Eastlake. What a crazy ride.
It was a crazy ride. And like, I feel like it was the crazy ride, and we had like our hands in the air and taking every turn and climbing up these, like, it's like a roller coaster, climbing up these things like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And I feel like we're lifting the bar and stepping out.
Yeah.
And it's been a good ride, and I would do it all again.
Yeah.
So, but it's time to be done for now. So, thanks to Eastlake, everything that Eastlake has been, it's been beautiful.
Been beautiful. Thanks for this time. I appreciate your reflections. I'm glad we got to do this. And for anybody listening, thanks for all that you've done to help. Thank you for making Eastlake what it is, what it was.
Thank you for joining us. To make a donation, head to eastlakecc.com/donate.